Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I'm Minka Makalani, Director of the Warfield Center for African and African American Studies, and we are helping to co-sponsor today's talk. And I am here to introduce Dr. Hadassah St. Hubert. Did I pronounce it right? Okay. Who is currently the Council on Library and Information Resources Postdoctoral Fellow in Data Curation for Latin American and Caribbean Studies with the Digital Library of the Caribbean at Florida International University. She took her Ph.D. in history from the University of Miami, and her dissertation, Visions of a Modern Nation, Haiti at the World's Fairs, focuses on Haiti's participation in World's Fairs and Expositions in the 20th century. Dr. St. Hubert served as the assistant editor for Haiti and Island Luminous, a site dedicated entirely to Haitian history and Haitian studies. As a postdoctoral fellow at the Digital Library of the Caribbean, she leads programming and digitization efforts in collaboration with a French institute. I'm gonna butcher it if I say it. In this cooperative project, she will provide training and expert technical assistance to the Institute in its digitization efforts. In addition, she will increase access to and preserve Haitian information resources by digitizing archives, mapping sites, and making the archive available in English, French, and Haitian Creole. She is here today to talk about her work with the Digital Library of the Caribbean and its Protecting Haitian Patrimony Initiative, which emphasizes accountability and transparency. The Digital Library of the Caribbean actually built Haiti and Island Luminous to help readers learn about Haiti's history by combining rare books, manuscripts, newspapers, and photos digitized by archives and libraries in Haiti and the United States, with commentary by over 100 authors from universities around the world. In her presentation today, Digital Library of the Caribbean and Protecting Haitian Patrimony Initiative will discuss cultural preservation initiatives in Haiti supported by dLOC. So join me in welcoming Dr. St. Hubert.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you especially to Liz Benson and the Warfield Center. Thank you, Minka, for the great introduction. I'm very happy to be here at UT Austin. This is actually my first time in Austin. I've been to Dallas before, but I was like, Austin seems like the place to be. I've had a number of friends move here over the past few years, so I'm very much happy to be here. So let's talk a little bit about Digital Library of the Caribbean. It was established in 2004. It's a platform for Caribbean research materials, which are free and open access. It's administered by the Florida International University, where I am located, in partnership with the University of the Virgin Islands, and University of Florida leads our technical head, so they are in charge of the website. I know I said that, and all of you are like, what does that even mean? 3 librarians, many years ago in 2004, met up at a conference called ACURO. That's the Association for Caribbean University Research and Institutional Libraries. So they were concerned that there wasn't a central area where their researchers could actually find Caribbean research materials from Caribbean archives. And so they submitted a grant to the U.S. Department of Education. At the time, it was called TICFIA, the Technological Innovation and Cooperation for Foreign Information Access Grant. And then they won, and that's how dLOC was born, right? So dLOC as a platform was actually launched in 2006. And after about 500,000 from this TICFIA grant, they only had maybe 300 and something views on the website, to their dismay. But I'm happy to report today that we average 7 million views per month now. So what a way we've come. We're actually celebrating our 15-year anniversary over the summer. So the logo that you actually see here is done by a Trinidadian artist. It is a hummingbird, even though he says, well, it's inspired by a hummingbird, which happens to be native to the Americas specifically. The line represents the turning of pages. So we're very happy to work with him on trying to rebrand Digital Library of the Caribbean, and hopefully in the next coming months, we'll actually do that all over our website as well. So, Digital Library of the Caribbean's diverse partners serve an international community of scholars, students, and peoples by working together to preserve and provide enhanced electronic materials, specifically cultural, historical, legal, governmental, all different kinds of research materials, even from museums, available for free and open access. dLOC's partners collaborate with scholars, teachers, archivists to promote and perform educational outreach for the Caribbean and create new works of digital scholarship and develop other research and teaching initiatives. So dLOC's partners are very crucial to what dLOC actually is. Without our Caribbean institutions, we would not be dLOC. So we also actually conduct a lot of training sessions and help them develop resources that collaboratively that they can make available online and for free and open access. But most importantly, dLOC does not make any claim to ownership of these materials that it hosts and serves in its collections. All the project partners are responsible for the copyright and control of their own submitted content. And that is very important to us to establish whenever we gain new partners, that this is your Caribbean patrimony. It is up to you what you would like to make available and what you would not like to make available. So at times we find that institutions prefer to use us as a repository. So here it says that I have 3.5 million pages of content. It's actually 4 million pages of content. About 500,000 our partners are just choosing to kind of hold on and just leave it in the repository for now until they're ready to make it free and open access. And this is part of us kind of building capacity for our Caribbean institutions. Many times they don't have their own developed repositories yet to store this information. So Digital Library of the Caribbean has been able to kind of step in and help them at least with this process. So right now we currently have about 70 partners in the Caribbean, Europe, and the United States, averaging about 7 million views per month, about 41,000 different titles with 217 items on the website. Let me speak a little bit more about our training program. Since 2005, we've delivered over 70 on-site trainings in the Caribbean. dLOC digitization presentations are also held at ACURAL. That's our Association for Caribbean, and you understand. So every year we do meet up with our Caribbean partners directly in the Caribbean. This year they're holding the conference in Aruba. Who wouldn't want to go to Aruba? So we do the trainings in Aruba for many of our partners there to reach a lot more. We also have trilingual digitization manuals available on our website, Spanish, English, and Creole. Some of them are in French as well, but Creole happens to be the preferred language for our Haiti partners. New opportunities for training always continue to develop. At the end of the month, we're actually hosting archivists from the University of Guyana Libraries, from University of West Indies, St. Augustine in Trinidad, and also Archives Nationales d'Haïti, the National Archives of Haiti. And we're doing like a week training specifically on audio, visual materials, and books. They want to know how to do books. They also want to know a little bit more information about grant writing, so we basically respond to whatever their needs are at the time, and we're lucky enough for that week of training to have sponsorship from our Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center at Florida International University to bring a lot of these scholars to Miami for this training. Scholarly collaborations. So Lori Taylor, who is the digital scholarship librarian at University of Florida, who's part of dLOC as well, and myself, we actually recently reorganized our scholarly board. So our scholarly board, we're still deciding what should they do. We gave them that duty, but most importantly for me, I had to make sure that half of the scholarly board were actually scholars in the Caribbean, working in the Caribbean, and the other half could be from the US and wherever else. So we actually have scholars from Trinidad, Jamaica, Haiti, Belize as well, so who are part of that scholarly board who will be advising us on different things. One of the things that they actually, the scholarly board has participated in is in the writing of grants. Specifically, we've had another number of wins with the Endangered Archives program, Haiti, Barbados, and there's a few more hopefully coming down the line as well. And what we do, we actually, scholars are always very interested in gaining access to archival materials, but they don't know exactly what that means, right? Especially when you're writing a grant budget, right? They think, hey, you just need some machines, right? That's it. No, they need the money for the labor. You need to cut the check. So oftentimes we have to consult with them and be like, listen, at least 70, 80% of your budget or more needs to go directly to the archives in the Caribbean. We understand that, your institutions have to take fringe and so on and so forth, but as much as possible needs to be made available to actually make these projects happen. Because sometimes what we have found is all this equipment would be staying in the archives and no one has the time to actually work on the digitization that you actually proposed. So this is how dLOC has been able to kind of intervene and work in collaboration with scholars to actually make more materials available. And we've been with the EAP Haiti grant, they made about 19 different newspapers from the 19th century available, and they're all posted on dLOC right now. And these were very delicate and fragile. Same thing with the Barbados Mercury Gazette. Without this grant, these documents probably would have perished, unfortunately, just because of the state that they were in. So in this particular case, digitization served as preservation, but that's not always the case. I prefer to actually preserve the actual documents, if possible, rather than just the digital access to it. For educational outreach, dLOC actually does a lot of work with Miami-Dade public schools and teachers, specifically to develop K through 12 curriculum. So we actually have a number of materials online at dloc.com. So you can find resources, lesson plans, syllabi, and other educational resources about various different topics on dLOC. We have a shared governance similar to our scholarly board. I think our executive board is about 60% Caribbean institutions and about 40% US-based institutions. So it is Digital Library of the Caribbean. We very much value the materials that the Caribbean is providing, and so the ownership is something that is very valuable to them. And being incorporated into this kind of democratic structure was always a major point of emphasis. So this is actually a list of just part of our partners. Some of them haven't sent their logos in, so so it's not as updated, but we have about 70 or so, and this is starting from just 9 initial partners that dLOC has had in Haiti, also CARICOM, Jamaica, Dominican Republic, Venezuela, in addition to Florida International University, University of Florida, and the University of Central Florida. The next few years, we're actually going to probably see a lot more growth in collections coming from Cuba and Puerto Rico, just because of a number of grant initiatives that we've been on. Recently, University of Florida Libraries, in collaboration with Digital Library of the Caribbean, has been working to make newspapers pre-1925 from Puerto Rico available. So there'll be a number of digitization efforts going on at the University of Puerto Rico. And probably see a little bit more because there's been a lot more interest in preserving information from Puerto Rico. As well, Cuba, just because we're located in Miami, large Cuban diaspora, there's been interest in acquiring a lot more materials. So we've made a number of partnerships in the past few years, particularly with religious institutions who have a very interesting archives that are beyond their scope. Apparently, at a certain point after the 1959 revolution in Cuba, this is where certain people were hiding their documents in religious institutions. So, we're looking forward to see what actually comes up out of this and what kind of things we're looking at. One of our partners happens to be the Cuban Genealogy Institute as well. So they've uploaded a number of information just to kind of, inform other people as well. But now to the main part of the presentation, Protecting Haitian Patrimony. So in 2009, a graduate student by the name of Adam Sylvia at Florida International University had an idea about connecting Haitian archival materials to commentary by scholars, but specifically from 1934 to 1957. He chose a very specific time period. He was like, small project, you know, very feasible, we can do it. And then the 2010 earthquake happened in Haiti. And then there was increasing interest, like, well, why don't you put everything, do all of Haitian history? And he was like, I'm a graduate student. And then I brought on board about 2011, 2012 to kind of assist in the recruitment of scholars, particularly since I was heavily involved in the Haitian Studies Association, of which now I'm a member of the board. So, so a lot of the expert contributions was very much through the both of our efforts, and Brooke Wooldridge at the time, who was the director of Digital Library of the Caribbean. But we wanted to highlight the archives in Haiti, right? I wanted to bring attention to the state of the archives in Haiti, which a lot of them were damaged, particularly after the 2010 earthquake. So one of our partners, the National Archives of Haiti, we actually helped them set up their digitization center. They took our advice, they made their walls 18% gray and everything. We helped them purchase materials and equipment, and you know, they're all set up and ready to go, they're trained, and you know, what I like to see is that it's, they value the work so much. A lot of the workers could easily use these skills and transition to other places, but now they go to conferences in Utah and France talking about the work and digitization that they've been able to do as a result of this Protecting Haitian Patrimony Initiative that dLOC sponsored. So Haiti and Island Luminous, we made sure that was trilingual. It was very important that the Haitian community would be able to actually read the information that's on there, even though the documents would be mostly in French, given that the Haitian state at the time, at least before 1990, French was the official language of documents, and it's still the case today, even though there's some kind of denial on it. Hopefully, over time, the Haitian Creole will be more represented in government documents and so on and so forth. So initially, as I said, it was supposed to cover 1934 to 1946, well, 1956 really. But we named it an Island Luminous after a poem by Jacques Romain, who is a major Haitian literature figure. But we feature contributions from current scholars, students, providing direct links to access to the actual archival materials on the website. And it was actually proudly funded by the Green Family Foundation as well. And that's how they were able to pay us grad students, paid. I'm gonna put an emphasis on that, to kind of conduct this work. We launched in late 2013, early 2014. And I put this photo specifically here because I know Edwige Dantica was here only a few weeks ago. And so that is myself and my husband. We see her every other week in Miami, so it's fine. She's wonderful. So we actually put a kiosk in the Little Haiti Cultural Center as kind of more of a public outreach. The cabinet was actually designed by a famous Haitian artist, Edouard Duval-Carrier. The Green family paid for that, so we're very happy. This kiosk is actually going to be relocated to the North Miami Library. I was actually just talking about gentrification and changes in Miami and so on. More of the Haitian community lives in North Miami. North Miami Public Libraries has been insisting that they have this, that you know there's more Haitians willing to visit and see the exhibit, so we are placing it there in May for Haitian Heritage Month. We also have another kiosk at a St. La Haitian Neighborhood Community Center. They requested it so that way they can do teaching materials for their students that come in for help. So we've been getting a lot of requests and actually trying to make plans to kind of make this off-site and offline and actually available in Haiti and kiosks as well. So we're working with Focal, which is based in Haiti, to see what we can do to actually make it more available. But it's been a few years, so it needs a refresh. So I'm also working on a grant in collaboration with the Green family to actually, you know, resolicit more contributions, include more archival materials, and to kind of re-jumpstart the website again. Current work I'm doing now during my CLIR postdoc. Okay, so part of the Haitian Patrimony Initiative, ISPAN, which is basically the National Patrimony Institute in Haiti, they are responsible for the UNESCO designation of this building you see here, the Citadel, which is the highest fortress in the Americas. So when it comes to any historic preservation in Haiti, they are the ones that are in charge of it. They actually got designations by the government for, I believe, 33 or so historic buildings across Haiti, probably more. A number of famous architects established ISPAN in 1979. Albert Magonez, in particular, who, I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the unknown maroon statue in Haiti, but he is the architect who constructed that. But his concern was to preserve a lot of the Haitian architecture all throughout the country. So him and a number of architects and engineers established ISPAN to make sure to protect this national heritage. As part of the partnership with dLOC, they don't have enough funding, as with most Caribbean institutions. So part of that was applying for FIU to have like to be a host for the CLIR Fellowship, and then they got me. How lucky they are. Who happens to, you know, funny enough, my work with Expositions and so on, there was an exposition in 1949, so I knew a number of the architects who actually established the institute, so it actually paralleled my work very closely. And so they actually have a number of just architectural designs in their archive. I mean, just from all throughout the country of all the historic buildings, recordings of the kind of preservation work, also like ceremonies that were held on these different sites. So they needed the help to actually try to acquire more funds so they can actually jumpstart their archive. So part of the work I do is called digital stewardship. Rather, it's really grant writing. It's just a fancy word for grant writing. So I've done a number of different grants for ISPAN, and I'm happy to announce that there's one coming down in the next few months. There's World Bank funding that's coming through to kind of help with their archive, which now looks like this. I would show you the before photos, but it would be a bad opinion, so this is the after, you know, after consultation with us and so on. So, so the World Bank funding is coming through. There's another few grants that are possibly coming through as well. One in particular that I've worked on is to provide about $300,000 to not just ISPAN, but a number of our Haitian partners for Digital Library of the Caribbean for the preservation of Vodou arts and culture and sites. So I work, luckily, my advisor, Kate Ramsey, happened to be an expert in Haitian history and Vodou and the law, so I was like, gather your friends. And so she did. So in consultation with a number of friends, I was able to kind of push back with the funders and be like, this is what we want, this is what we need. And having a person actually do that in this role is actually very important, because sometimes funders think, oh, we just want to fund this, and they're not quite sure what it means, especially when we're talking about the preservation of Vodou art and culture. Like, what does that mean to an outside funder who's not from that country? So it was very good to actually have those kind of conversations in consultation with many scholars who, you know, a lot of times, what I find, at least with a lot of grant provided funds and so on, they come in for a few years and then that's it. They kind of cut off. Whereas Digital Library of the Caribbean, we've been there for like 15 years. So our part of our agreement with the fund is like, okay, so these people are coming on as partners, but we're going to work with them for their ongoing preservation. You guys do the emergency, we understand, but we'd love if you did it long term. And so hopefully from there they'll have better conversations, but no matter what, Digital Library of the Caribbean is around. So, okay. So another project I'm working on of ISPAN is kind of the mapping of forts throughout Haiti. So I've managed to gather a data set, which I'm so excited about. That was like my first step. Now I just have to find the exact geolocation and codes I'm working on with them. And I happened to meet a collector who has a number of aerial shots of these sites and so on. And I'm working with another scholar who, on foot one day, she just visits all the different forts whenever she can to get more recent photos. So we're doing kind of like a collaborative like mapping project together, and hopefully we can get started on that a little bit more over the summer after, because spring is always grants period, so it's like grants. So after May, we'll be doing more work with this. Let's see. So I realize I've actually gone through my presentation very quickly. But I would very much like to end kind of emphasizing about like dLOC not owning any of these materials, right? And then that we're kind of giving these organizations, not giving, rather, they own their collections, period, right? So that's something I feel like has been kind of in contention with other archives, especially as we talk about like post-custodial archives, or as we speak about repatriation initiatives and so on. So even at dLOC, we've had a number of requests from partners like, hey, we know that this person, this institution has our stuff. You know, so kind of trying to move those conversations forward in productive ways. One of my colleagues at another institution is working on digital repatriation to Caribbean islands and so on, just because unfortunately some of those institutions are not quite set up yet to actually take care and steward the materials. So I mean, it's been interesting kind of doing this work in the Caribbean, at least when I was doing archival work for my dissertation. You know, I actually got to see Digital Library of the Caribbean set up the digitization lab at Archives Nationales in Haiti, so, and troubleshooted for them when I could. So that's the thing, getting them set up for that, but also the kind of like long-term aid that they would need to continuously do this work. So, which means trainings, right? But unfortunately, sometimes I find that there's not enough funding to actually do that kind of ongoing capacity building work. That's at least some of the challenges that I've experienced in the past few months in my positions. There's money for migrating to other platforms or so on. There's money for other things, but not necessarily for the institutions in the Caribbean who our scholars want the information from. So I'm hoping you guys have some ideas shifting conversations and all, especially for these kind of grant funders that we very much rely on to do this work, for them to kind of understand the situation on the ground in the Caribbean and the needs of these institutions directly. So I'll end at that. For more information, visit us at dLOC.com, islandluminous.fiu if you want to look at the Island Luminous exhibit. And I welcome any questions that you might have. I'd love this to be very much a conversation about Caribbean archives, Latin American archives, and well, thank you. So any questions? Sure.
Talk a little bit more about. Thank you. Great talk, by the way. I thank you for sharing your work with us. Could you elaborate more on your outreach efforts, not only the K through 12 work, but then also how and I've heard it elsewhere, but how do you activate the archive in the communities? The digital archive, how do you activate that in the communities where they are from? Could you talk a little bit more about those efforts?
Sure. So I do want to say, before I started at Digital Library of the Caribbean, we were averaging maybe 4 million views a month. I want to say 2 months after I started, after going to numerous conferences, suddenly we jumped to 7 million. Part of that is actually meeting with people, talking about Digital Library of the Caribbean in various different places and institutions, connecting with Caribbean scholars, Latin American scholars to make sure they're aware of the resources. So, and also in the classrooms as well, like telling people, and I feel like this is a wider conversation about archives in general, getting people who do the humanities to come and visit the archives, come and see the archives, work with us at the archives. Like, we have so much to contribute, so much to learn. So I feel like that has to be, you can put things online, but that doesn't mean that they're accessible, right? You have to tell people how to find them. So part of the work is actually going to people, doing a lot of conferences, speaking to people, telling everyone, hey, by the way, oh, you're doing this research, maybe you might find it at Digital Library of the Caribbean. So as far as our K through 12 outreach, we do this in collaboration with our Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center, who has like a whole summer focused of workshops and resources just for Miami-Dade public schools. And so every summer we have a number of different sessions just for materials that they themselves can develop, that they're interested in developing. So we involve the Miami teachers directly in this process. And we also, even during the year, we do visit a number of different institutions throughout Miami-Dade. I believe Miguel Asensio, who's the director, does a number of projects with, there's this institution, smaller public school that is nearby in Sweetwater, Miami, that he does like a lot of outreach work with for Digital Library of the Caribbean. Also, I do some outreach with Superintendent Carvalho's institution, which is called iPrep, which is a online public school pretty much, but it's, it's not online, it's more like we do digital work. We don't use paper, that's their emphasis. So I do a number of like workshops telling like the teachers there how to use it. So, but a lot of it is a person-to-person outreach, which I think is sometimes undervalued, but we need to be our own propaganda machine.
Thank you for your talk. It was so compelling. I have a two-part question.
Sure.
The first, if you could tell us a little bit more about the infrastructure of dLOC at the university and kind of how you project management and how as an organization you're structured and get things done. And as an extension of that, my second question, if you could talk more about the trainings. Is it the staff at dLOC that does that training? Is it the scholarly board that does that training, and kind of how you manage that part of the work?
Okay. So as far as the infrastructure, so FIU is the administrative base. It's very strange, but we still do work on the website, obviously, and upload on the website. But the system itself is based on SOBEC CM. That's the online repository platform. So it's open source. It's free. So a number of our Florida institutions have been using it. So FIU's digital collections repository is dPanther, but it's still based on SOBEC. I think University of Central Florida also uses SOBEC as well. So that's what houses the kind of digital collection and the platform and so on. I think there needs to be some updates. They're working on some updates, at least aesthetically on the site, and also to make the searches a little bit easier. I'm kind of annoying to them, so I usually send them like a list of like, hey, by the way, this one needs outdated, yeah. Or sometimes I just do it myself and just send it. But when you do have like that much materials, it does become very hard to curate, right? So I find myself at times just like, hey, if you're already kind of working on the project with using dLOC materials, hi, would you like to curate a collection? So I've been doing a lot of that, just kind of like, if you're already doing it, I don't want anyone doing extra beyond what they're doing, right? Because it's, unfortunately, it's unpaid work. I guess I should talk a little bit how dLOC was established at FIU. Initially, it was housed in our Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center. So after we lost the TIC-FIA grant, like 2008 happened, once you're grant funded, so on. But the libraries decided to fund the director position. So we moved into the libraries, but we still very much do a lot of things with Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center. So even for the trainings, like Latin American and Caribbean Studies Center, they're the ones who actually have been paying for a number of scholars to make the visit to Miami whenever we can't go to the Caribbean. So that's been a great help for us. University of Florida, since they provide our technical infrastructure, they've applied for a number of grants on behalf of Digital Library of the Caribbean. But Digital Library of the Caribbean actually only has one full-time employee, which is Miguel Asensio. I am the second full-time, but once again, this is a contingent position. right? So, but our colleagues at UF, they do so much in terms of like even just making sure that all these collections are available, particularly the ones, the CLIR grant that they won just for University of Puerto Rico's newspapers, amazing. So that's part of the infrastructure question. As far as trainings and who does it, we actually invite a number of people, like, just to come. Even if you're a scholar or archivist, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're interested, we actually allow people just to come. Like, so History Miami is one of our partners. So, you know, it's a local, it's basically Miami Heritage Collection. So they come and, you know, we train them and they train others in turn. So it depends on the kind of expertise that, because we're responding to the needs of our Caribbean partners and what they're interested in. So even the trainings that we're going to do in April with University of Guyana, University of West Indies, Salises, and National Archives, it's especially requested. They're like, we want this, and we want this, and we want this. So whenever we even know someone who has that kind of expertise, we're like, hey, would you like to come and actually help us with this training? So we've been actually working with Stephen Fullwood, who used to be the head archivist at Schomburg Center, exactly. So we bring people who have the expertise if we don't. So in addition to we do the trainings, but it really depends on, it's about our network. So once again, dLOC is about its partners. So whoever has the expertise for responding to our Caribbean partners' needs, we invite them, or like, hey, could you help us out with this? So we even have Miami-Dade Wolfson Archives, who has a number of audiovisual materials, particularly their Miami News collections that they've been digitizing. And that's the kind of expertise that the National Archives is requesting. So we're doing an on-site visit there, so that way they can see. So that's part of our trainings work as well. You know, the trainings vary, but in terms of like the deeper content, like later on during the week. But the first 2 days, it's pretty much FADGI, federal, it's basically the federal guidelines for digitization. So we go over the kind of specifics on the manual and stuff like that, and they're like, oh God, for the first 2 days until we finally get them to the hands-on. We're like, okay, when you digitize to the highest standard preservation quality. They're like, sure, fine, you know. But yeah, we basically do trainings in response to our Caribbean partners and their needs. And we welcome anyone from not just our South Florida communities, if anyone's actually just interested in just learning these techniques. Like, we have a number of graduate students who are like, hey, I'm going to the archives in Haiti for like a month or something like that. Do you know if they need any help or something? What can I do to prepare myself? And so they come to us, and we include them as part of the trainings. We had another, so FIU has a DC campus. There's a Emilio Cueto collection that FIU, University of Florida, houses. And we trained like a student worker in Miami who was selected as part of the internship to make sure she was prepared and ready to do the work when she actually went to DC for her internship. So yeah, we do a number of things. I hope that answered everything.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I have two questions.
Sure.
One is about repatriation initiatives. I know that the Netherlands has been particularly activist, but I was wondering about other places like the UK and what that process has looked like. And then my second question is about government bureaucracy with some of these projects. And how has that impacted some of the work you've done? Have you found that a challenge in terms of some of the archives that are under direct, you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah, I know. Okay.
That's my question.
So I haven't had to deal with repatriation directly. Potentially that might be the case in the next coming months. We're looking to acquire a particular collection. So, and I told at least a number of the librarians that some of this stuff cannot stay at this institution. Yeah, no. And so because dLOC has a number of Haiti partners, I was like, well, you need to at least speak to them and evaluate what is the proper place for these items, because I wouldn't want that association. And also it would look bad with the institution. So We're actually, I'm in discussions, but I haven't actually seen like a full process kind of go through and what that looks like. I know France returned is returning a number of objects to Benin. I'm not sure if they've been returning yet, because I've been following one of the museum directors on Twitter, and it seems like they're not there yet. So I think we're still kind of waiting and seeing, because, you know, it's one thing to return the item, but I need help with the collection stewardship. I need help with archivists. I need help with curators. Like those are the kinds of needs that they actually want at these archival institutions. That's what we're really looking for. So I'd love to see the conversation move to that as well. We'll see. Your second part, government bureaucracy. So a number of Haiti's partners, and how it works in the Caribbean as well, a lot of the archives are government, you know, they're part of the government, pretty much. They're different branches of the government. So even when we make certain things open access and free online, there's a discussion before them, because it's like, well, if we make this free online, a number of Caribbean institutions have told us, well, you scholars won't come, you know? And they've seen the opposite to be true. More scholars have come as a result, but there's still this, but it's still a real issue of theirs. They're like, how can we have enough money to support our archives? And so we're still figuring that out ourselves. Like, you know, how can we help these institutions better? Like, you know, so whether it's through like these EAP grants and so on, to making sure that they have enough money to pay their staff members when these projects are going on. But, you know, we'd love to hear more kind of sustained conversations about, hey, can you support this archive directly? And as far as more government bureaucracy, particularly in Haiti, so ISPAN is part of the Haitian government. So certain grants you cannot give to governmental institutions. So that means it actually limits them to the pools of money that they'd be offered if they were just like their own autonomous archive, right? At the same time, they wouldn't have the infrastructure set up if they weren't linked to the government. So, but in particular, at least this year, it's been a little bit harder in Haiti because of the travel warnings by the US government. So as a FIU and Florida State employee, I cannot go to Haiti on FIU's dime, which is a problem. But luckily, our Latin American Caribbean Studies Center said that they will, you know, fly out certain people from Haiti to Miami to get the trainings that they need. So that's how we've been able to kind of circumvent certain things. But at least what we find with government bureaucracy, particularly Haiti has a lot of turnover when it comes to the directors of these libraries. We deal with the employees more. They're the ones who are there every day, more often. So that's kind of longer relationship that you want to establish, rather than at least certain scholars themselves, they try to deal with the directors, but those positions sometimes are politically appointed, so people don't stay as long. So you want to work with the employees, see what their needs are, and you get actually probably better evaluation of what's going on in the archive. So so we have worked with directors and workers, because some of them, like the National Archives, the director has been there for significantly longer than others. And the private archives are always very much easier to deal with, but other government archives, because of their turnover, sometimes it's hard to get some projects initiated, and even when you're dealing with them directly. So it's, at least we found it's easier to deal with the employees who are actually there on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. So I'm going to make a statement and then ask a question that seems to contradict the statement. And so the statement is, I'm really impressed by the fact that dLOC combines materials from across the Caribbean, right? And isn't limited by, the post-colonial remnants of balkanization that can happen along linguistic lines, right? And that has sometimes happened in terms of scholarly organizations within Caribbean studies. But then my question that will contradict that, I'm curious if you have data about usage along linguistic lines. So people accessing French language materials, Creole, Spanish, English. I'd just be curious to hear if that information exists.
I don't know off the top of my head, but I know, so at one point, because of the 2010 earthquake and the kind of like funding that we received for the Haitian archives, Digital Library of the Caribbean was called Digital Library of Haiti. That was kind of, because it was as high as 30% of dLOC's materials were actually Haiti related. Now they're down to like 20 or so percent. So we found that, yes, at one point the French language materials were being used the most. But our most popular, it's Dario de la Marina, it's from Cuba, actually has been used the most ever, and by Cuban Americans in Miami in particular, because at least from what another person has told me, they're looking for their pre-1959 properties and businesses through this newspaper that was published since the 18th, 19th century. So it's interesting the kind of uses, because, even though I've been talking a lot about scholars using Digital Library of the Caribbean, obviously when you get 7 million hits a month, it's beyond that at a certain point. So people have very different usages for what they're looking at dLOC. In regards to even the Jamaica materials, a colleague emailed me just maybe a few weeks ago, was like, hey, I found my uncle who happened to be a poet, and I found his poetry on dLOC, and this is so wonderful, I need to tell more people about it. I recognize this other person. So people are making connections that we're not necessarily doing on our own just by making these materials available. But I very much would love to see a lot more curated collections, because the site itself, sometimes it's a little hard to navigate if you don't know specifically what you're looking for, which is okay, especially as when I was in graduate school, that was okay. I just type in Haiti, I don't know what you have, let me see what you have, and then a number of too many newspapers came up. I was like, okay, maybe I need to be more specific, right? But yeah, as far as linguistics, we've seen a lot more Spanish, French, but also from Aruba. There's been a lot of access from Aruba as well, and I think they had a number of things in is it Papiamento? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've seen a number of kind of different usages, but the highest is definitely, as of right now, Spanish language materials and then French language materials. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So we, considering the volume of the collection, right, in the millions of pages, and I ask this because we've been getting inquiries in terms of doing big data analysis over these materials. First question would be, are y'all getting that sort of inquiry for essentially corpus-wide, either metadata or being able to OCR those materials to do more of the data mining text analysis? And if so, how are y'all dealing with not only the demand, but then also how are y'all purveying that access, considering that it's not, they're not materials that are in your institution specifically?
Okay, so as far as kind of those kind of requests, when SOBEC was developed, it was maybe 2 or so developers who no longer are at University of Florida. So recently, I want to say a few months ago, they have rehired a new developer to kind of work with all these millions of pages and so on. OCR, depending on the kind of materials there are, it hasn't worked because a lot of it is written and scripted, unfortunately, but we're still kind of working on making it as accessible as possible. So we've been having at least talks with University of Florida and what we can do to kind of make these collections even more accessible. I do want to mention the Early Caribbean Digital Archive, which is one of our partners. So with the Barbados Mercury materials that we have on dLOC, they're actually working on a project to kind of make them more readable and so on. So sometimes we've been exporting work to other people who can do that, just because we just have so much to do on the technical side and on these kind of grant projects that we find ourselves ultimately, we're understaffed. So the work that we'd love to do, we'd love to kind of like, I have so many projects in mind, but it just comes down to the understaffing. Yeah. So, but we've been talking about it at least. So, scheduled to speak with Lori Taylor a little bit more, like probably later this week, to kind of see what our technical updates have been, because we've been even the harvesting from our different partners for the materials and stuff to make sure that those updates are occurring. That it's only because we got the developer now that they can start back up again. So.
One last question, I swear. You have over 70 partners, right? You said. How do you cultivate those relationships? What are the expectations? Is it a one-time project? Can you talk a little bit more about that? Because that's quite a few partnerships there.
Yeah, so some of them happened by accident. Like, I remember we were at the Museums Association of the Caribbean meeting a few years ago when it was held in Miami, and that's when we met the director of the Museums and Houses of Culture of Belize, and that's how we started a partnership. And so sometimes it's just something like that, just, through these kind of certain particular conferences and so on. But then, like, he would, certain people bring up our attention to other collections that are available, and so we would just kind of go out and see, like, hey, would you like to make your stuff accessible via dLOC or so on? So even with ISPAN, the relationship, from what I understand, Miguel, director of Digital Library of the Caribbean, happened to meet one of the ISPAN members, like, on a flight, sitting next to them, and they were talking about the archive, and he was like, wow, I happen to work at Digital Library of the Caribbean, and then that's how the partnership gets started. So some of them are more like orchestrated, like, hi, you're an institution, let us Benson, we'll be receiving an invitation probably very soon. Would you like to be a partner of Digital Library of the Caribbean? So some of them are more formalized in that kind of way, through, a number of our different conference organizations, but sometimes some of them are by accident.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. This was really interesting. I love hearing you talk about your work. I'm curious if you could say a little bit more about your work as a grant writer and sort of just what that looks like. Are you sort of writing grants for these other institutions? Is that what's the relationship of that work to the rest of the partnerships, I guess?
Okay. So for ISPAN specifically, when I write the grants, it's through FIU. So I make sure that everything is transparent with them. They see the budgets, that we do. They know how they're going to get paid for so on. That means at FIU, they have to be brought on as subcontractors or consultants. So whatever that paperwork process is needed, we make sure that we do that with them. FIU, and I'm sure other institutions as well, there's a preference to give directly to US-based institutions, at least from what I found when you're applying for grants. That's just how it is. And then it's kind of weird because you serve as like a third party to kind of, but that's how it is, unfortunately. Whenever there is a way to give them the money directly, we tell them we will help them write it and just, help them submit it or so on. But that has been very rare, unfortunately, except for the World Bank, where we've been in conversations, but dealing with the World Bank, I realize is more difficult than I initially thought. It's just a lot of back and forth when they grant you the money, but then dispersing the money becomes a problem. So there's always excuses to not disperse the money that was promised and so on. So yeah. So we try to intervene however we can by using our status as a US-based institution to, I don't want to say an argue in behalf, but sometimes it does become that way, very unfortunately. So at least when dLOC, when we work with partners, we make sure we're transparent in the grant process as much as possible. And so unfortunately, when you do work at institutions, they're like, well, you still need to add on your fringe and then your indirect costs and so on. And so we do a lot of negotiations with our Office of Research and Development to kind of make sure we mitigate those costs as much as possible to give the most back to the partner, because ultimately, once again, we want access to this. We need to make it happen. We need to actually support the archives that are doing the work. So, but yeah, it's not fun. It's not fun at all. Especially just the writing. I mean, the writing process itself is intense, right? But then you have to deal with these kind of bureaucratic just to get funds dispersed, unfortunately, and that's what we're finding. So, and as I said, because of this kind of travel warning for Haiti, I don't know what that means in terms of dispersing funds later in the future. We haven't seen any issues with it yet, but, you know, I hope that doesn't become a problem. Any final questions? Well, thank you so much. Thank you.